part of the Saltarello finale from Mendelssohn's Fourth Symphony, the Italian. The Tonhalle-Orchester Zürich was conducted by this week's guest, Paavo Järvi. I'm James Jolly and welcome to this Gramophone Podcast, given in association with Wigmore Hall, who are welcoming to their stage this Easter performers including Gramophone Award winners Isabel Faust and Alexander Melnikov, as well as the Sacconi Quartet and the Quatuor Arod, Gesualdo VI, the violinist Daniel Pioro, and the Marian Consort. Full details at wigmore-hall.org.uk. Paavo Järvi's recorded catalogue has just added another cycle, the complete Mendelssohn symphonies, recorded for Alpha Classics and just out. And recorded cycles provided a nice opener for a conversation we had by Zoom a couple of weeks ago. Because it's interesting the way you record complete symphonic cycles. You know, we've done Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Bruckner, Mahler, Nielsen, Sibelius, Franz Schmidt. I'm sure I've left a few out. It sort of swings and roundabouts because, you know, it's wonderful to have a complete group of symphonies by a composer, and it's great programming across a season or 2 seasons or whatever. But for you as a conductor, there must be this challenge of having to conduct a work that you're not, say, madly keen on, or, you know, maybe even active dislike, because you've got to do that, you know, entire group.
Well, most of the cycles that I have recorded, I must say that I really believe in and stand by and really love each work. There are certain, for example, the reason I haven't done Shostakovich, because I don't love every piece there. And it's, you know, Shostakovich is great as he is. There are certain symphonies that I can't really get into, like the number 2, number 3. I have huge problems with number 11 and 12 and all this stuff. And it's very subjective. It's not any kind of judgment on Shostakovich's work. It is just, for me, subjective. When it comes to Mahler's, there is no question. Each one of them, love is not even the right word. I think it is such an incredible universe that you're lucky if you can be part of even close to that orbit somewhere. The same thing with Beethoven, same with Brahms, Schumann, Schubert. All Schubert symphonies for me, I mean, and Mendelssohn definitely as well. You know, the thing with Mendelssohn is it used to be always kind of a common knowledge that number 1 is sort of a juvenilia, that not really something that's worth playing. It's one of my favorite symphonies now. It's one of my favorite Mendelssohn symphonies, number 1. Even recently, I have talked to some musicians who I really respect tremendously, and they say Lobgesang, yes, kind of a wonderful big work, not showing off really his greatness. It's as a composer. You know, I don't know. You know, that's why there are so many different musicians. I think it's one of the really fantastic pieces of music. I mean, Lobgesang, I am totally in love with this piece. So it all depends very much on subjective connection with music, and complete cycles per se are not so important unless you really believe in that composer in a kind of a total way. You know, and the other thing is that you can do a complete cycle if it's music that you strongly believe that needs to be helped or somehow presented again, so that it possibly could have another chance to be
I mean,
heard.
that's your father's kind of great guiding thing, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, and you know, I can't help it. I am my father's son, and in comparison to what he is able to kind of assimilate, you know, this, I am nowhere near that, and I don't even have this kind of aspiration. I never wanted to do that. Many things, but there are certain cycles, for example, the upcoming Mahler cycle, which for me had to be a cycle. It was one off wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, the Mendelssohns are interesting because, I mean, apart from the fact that, you know, they don't follow the numerical order at all. I mean, if you had to put them into order, it goes 1, 5, 4, 2, 3, which is completely crazy. But it's interesting the way that certain works have sort of come in and out of favour. I mean, I know you've just said that you love number 1, but I mean, number 1 is a real rarity on a concert programme these days. I mean, 2 was incredibly popular, you know, in the Victorian era, and very popular over here with all the British choral societies, and then it kind of fell out of favour. And it's only really sort of come back into favour, you know, in the last maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years. I mean, 4 and 3 were always kind of there. You know, they were the archetype. And the Reformation, a bit like the second, is one that I think a lot of people take a time to sort of creep up on before it sort of weaves its magic.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this is exactly how it is. And I think that the Reformation especially can, if one has a kind of a superficial look and one doesn't take enough time to look into it really seriously, and also perform it as well. I think that this is one of those moments which I find that performing a piece has a capacity of changing your mind about the piece. In other words, you know, we don't often get to that point. They said, well, we don't really want to perform the piece. We don't want to do it because we don't connect with it. Like I just said with Shostakovich, I've had experiences with some pieces, and the Reformation is one of them, where after performing and going through the process of preparing the piece for the performance, there was this point where I completely understood, okay, this is great. This is a wonderful, wonderful piece of music. You know, and with Reformation in general, there are a lot of questions, very much like the question with Resurrection Symphony with Mahler. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me, at least. I mean, I might get a lot of hate mail for this, but I mean, of course, all of this conversion is totally disingenuous. It is not. It's just for the form. It's just for the sake of fitting in, or somehow showing publicly that he is fitting into the culture, which has always been what's an interesting thing now, especially with the conflict with Hamas and all the Israeli war. You know, you start thinking about the history of Jews, and Jews have always been able to fit in, maybe because of the lack of their own homeland at the time, to fit into the culture and add value, using that horrible financial terms, VAT, you know, added value. But they have always been able to become part of the fabric and then make our fabric better. I mean, if you look at the contribution that the Jewish people have made to on any level, from music to film to poetry to science, you name it, it's there, you know. And it was never at the expense of their own religion and their own culture. They always kept their own culture alive and close to their hearts. And the public face was one thing, and the private life was something else. It was never at the expense of their own culture. They did assimilate and become part of the Western cultural fabric, yet they kept their own values and their own religion very much alive within themselves. And if you look at, for example, one of the most amazing moments in the Reformation Symphony is the most beautiful movement, in my opinion. It's a slow movement. And this is Reformation Symphony. That's where he's sort of showing the world that about Martin Luther and all this. If you speed that thing up a little bit, lam tam pa pa pam ta 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 ding dam ta ta ta. It is the most stereotypical klezmer tune. So it is just so clear that there are messages that are for public, and then there are private messages which mean so much more to Mendelssohn. And Mendelssohn and Mahler, there is nothing wrong with that. That was a sign of times at the time. They needed to show the world that they accept the superiority of Christianity. You know, and inside their hearts they lived the way they wanted to.
I mean, in terms of the sort of sound world of the Mendelssohn symphonies, having gone through the period instrument era to an extent, and we've come out the other side, and it's had its effect on the modern symphony orchestra, Do you have to find a different sound world for the symphonies? Because, I mean, obviously, you know, the first symphony, he was 15, he'd just written all those string symphonies, which are very light on their feet. You know, it's almost kind of Deutsche Kammerphilharmonie type repertoire.
The whole idea of the sound and the dilemma of the sound world for Mendelssohn is something that I was struggling with for a while. One of the things that you mentioned is that this whole period instrument and original instrument and performance practice movement, of course, has left a certain imprint to how we play the music of this era. And yet, when you play music of Mendelssohn, for some reason I have intuitive feeling that one cannot just blindly sort of take these principles, let's say that you play Haydn and Beethoven even, and sort of superimpose them to Mendelssohn. Of course, Mendelssohn is a bit later, but you start missing a certain amount of texture and the continuity and cantabile and legato and all of the things that we now associate more with romantic music. And I think that the music itself is a kind of a bridge between the classical era and the romantic era, and really majority of it is really looking towards the more romantic sound world. For example, when one looks at Gewandhaus and the history of Gewandhaus and the way they play now, but surely their tradition has evolved from coming directly from Mendelssohn. They have never bought into this original instrument or the historically informed performance practice. These are these old world orchestras that kind of have their way of playing. And if you look at their historic connection to Mendelssohn, one has to take a hint a little bit that probably they were also asked to produce a more lush, perhaps a little bit more connected and more romantic sound.
The difference in sound world between the first and second is quite enormous. One is a kind of big Victorian symphony cantata, which actually responds very well to the sound of a modern orchestra. And your orchestra, particularly now that the hall has been refurbished, I mean, there's a real weight to the sound that you must have taken a while to get used to that, I would have thought, almost yourself in Zurich.
I must say that I really, really love the sound in the Tonhalle, because, my criteria or my way of judging a good hall is somewhat naive and simple, or at least I will try to word it in that way. To me, a great hall is a hall that makes the orchestra sound better than it actually is. And I'm not talking about the hall needing to make Tonhalle sound better or any other orchestra. We are sounding very good. But still, if the hall can add something, if the hall can add a layer of glow, a warmth, beauty, color, something that is on top of what the orchestra can offer on their own, that's a great hall. And there are not so many halls who can do that. I mean, for example, Musikverein is a very good example. Every orchestra plays and sounds good in Musikverein simply because the hall helps them. And of course one needs to know how to play in these halls and how to not overpower them and use the best assets of the hall. But once one kind of gets to know the hall a little bit, it's an instrument. It adds a lot to the sound of the orchestra, and that's why some of the great orchestras, like let's say Concertgebouw, Wiener Philharmonic, and a few others, they are closely associated with their halls, and their sound is closely associated and known in the world because of these halls as well.
And you're now recording, quite a bit with the orchestra in your refurbished hall. So hopefully people will start to identify the Tonhalle sound, the union of sound orchestra and hall.
I think that this is the idea. The idea is to create some sort of a recognizable sound image or sound world. It's not so easy in this time and age because a lot goes into it other than the whole. A lot goes into it, the schooling and where the members of the orchestra learn their instruments and do they have a coherent string school and do they have a coherent wind school. And I mean, as far as the kind of really an old world, real recognizable sound is still there for me. I think it is maybe 2 orchestras in Germany, Gewandhaus and Staatskapelle Dresden, and Czech Philharmonic, and the rest of it is just gone. Unfortunately, or there is also, it's an evolution. I mean, you have fantastic orchestras that have incredible musicians playing in them, and they sound wonderful. It is just that they don't have their very unique sound that you can immediately recognize as well. That's the orchestra. You can recognize Czech Philharmonic easily.
And that's another example of an orchestra in a fabulous acoustic that they live and rehearse and perform in the same space. I mean, the Rudolfinum is just, one of the great concert halls. So when you recorded these symphonies, I mean, presumably they were all recorded live. Was it in a relatively short period, or did you spread them out over a number of seasons?
Actually, this is a project that is kind of a special one because this is our COVID project. It's the lockdown project. It's the project where majority of the orchestras were simply not doing anything, and we were not allowed to play concerts. But we were allowed to rehearse and make recordings. So we used this time to create these projects. We did a lot of work for streaming, like many orchestras did a lot of streaming concerts. But we thought, why not do the cycle of Mendelssohn symphonies, which anyway we wanted to do. But the option was to postpone them for later. And so a lot of those symphonies are done with a big distance between the players, like it was the law at the time, and it was quite a challenge. And I must say we were very, very, very fortunate, and actually I liked that idea that we actually went for it, because it was very cathartic also to do this work during the time of this sort of total lockdown, to make music and actually have a goal to go and work on something beautiful and really get some result. And it was a very important on many levels. On one level was of course musical, but the other one you could feel that people had a sense of purpose to do something beautiful and to do something meaningful.
And it must have also been, I mean, it's an unusual opportunity for an orchestra and a newish music director to sit down and work in a different way. I mean, that must have been a very good, bonding experience between you and the players, I would have thought.
Absolutely. You said it exactly right. I mean, this is exactly what was so valuable as well, is that we were kind of not in the public eye, and yet we were together, we were intensely working on producing something together, and not, you're exactly right, it was actually so important for developing an understanding and relationship with these wonderful musicians, Tonhalle musicians. Really exceptional group of people. They're incredibly eager and positive and have been trained, and I think that's in the culture, to really take everything very seriously and really work things out, and having this opportunity to do it away from the public eye and yet have a goal in mind in recording all of them was an important moment in us getting closer.
And I assume that you must have saved the second until out of lockdown, because you can't really perform a work with a massive great chorus and soloists under those conditions, which is kind of appropriate for a piece of music that's called Lobgesang, hymn of praise.
Absolutely, that's exactly how it was, and we left it for the last because, of course, singers and everything to do with soloists was a big no-no. We couldn't. There are all these scientific studies saying how far the spit would travel if somebody stays. You remember all of that. So singers had to wait and everything. Chorus had to wait, and we did it. And I'm very happy that we did it last because I felt that the hall, the Tonhalle, renovated hall, and the whole acoustics, it really helped and was very beneficial for that particular symphony. Because the other symphonies benefit from more clarity and a little bit more, I wouldn't want to say word objective, but more clear acoustics, while Lobgesang needs a cathedral. This is closest we can get to cathedral is our hall.
An extract from Mendelssohn's Second Symphony, the Lobgesang, Hymn of Praise. The Tonhalle-Orchester Zürich and the Zürcher Singakademie were conducted by our guest this week, Paavo Järvi, the Tonhalle's chief conductor. And that new recording of the complete Mendelssohn symphonies is just out from Alpha Classics. This Gramophone podcast was brought to you in association with Wigmore Hall, and their Easter offerings include a concert on March the 28th by the young violinist Daniel Pioro, who is joined by the Marian Consort for a programme called Divine Revolutions Revolving Around God, Circular Music and the Divine. Then on Good Friday, the Gramophone award-winning Isabel Faust and Alexander Melnikov play Mozart violin sonatas, and Melnikov returns the following evening for piano music by Rachmaninoff, including his Corelli and Chopin variations. On Easter morning, the Sacconi Quartet plays Mozart's Prussian Quartet and Benjamin Britten's Third. And the Monday lunchtime concert finds the Quatuor Arod playing Bach, Benjamin Attahir and Haydn's Emperor Quartet. And in the evening, Gesualdo 6 give a programme of madrigals. For tickets and more information, just head to wigmore-hall.org.uk. Gramophone podcasts are free, so if you enjoy them, then a really great way to support our work is to take out a subscription to Gramophone magazine. Over 13 issues a year, we bring you hundreds of reviews by our expert critics, as well as in-depth articles about the latest classical music releases and the most exciting musicians of the day. And if you head over to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and enter the code podcast20 in the checkout, you can even get a 20% discount off any subscription package. We really value your support. And consider leaving a review or rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And do look out for another Gramophone podcast very soon.